Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem Studio. I'm Amir Oren, sitting in for Jonathan Hessen, who is traveling. And first of all, we would like to wish all of our Christian viewers a happy Easter. With us today are Brigadier General in the Reserves, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the head of intelligence for Mossad, and even before that, a senior officer in Israel's Directorate of Military Intelligence. Welcome once again, Amnon. And from Central Israel, retired Colonel Dr. Eran Lerman, a former senior officer with both military intelligence and the national security staff. Welcome, Eran.
Thank you.
Our subject is the negotiations between Israel and those elements in the Middle East, mostly organizations or militias, which do not recognize Israel, and vice versa. Israel, too, would not like to be contaminated by a direct contact with them. However, there are practical reasons for holding negotiations, such as the one currently being done vis-à-vis Hamas regarding the hostage deal, ceasefire, and actually it all started in 1949, following the 1948 war, when the armistice agreements, most but not all of them, have been negotiated in the islands of Rhodes. They had an American negotiator, mediator, Ralph Bunche, who took over from the Swedish mediator, Folke Bernadotte, who was assassinated in Jerusalem. So it happens that there are always mediators, go-betweens, proximity talks, in order to create space for public appearances between the parties. General Sofrin, are there more benefits than costs in this method, or would it have been better for Israel to talk directly with Hezbollah, with Hamas? As we remember, the Oslo process started when an unofficial, later official contact was initiated by the PLO,
Right.
or with the PLO.
Let us take, for example, what happens right now with the negotiation with Hamas for releasing our imprisoned people that are were abducted to Gaza on October 7, 2023. If you look at the structure of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar is actually the one who makes the decisions about this engagement, because he's holding all the cards in his hand, namely 134 people, or part of them at least, alive, I hope, under his custody. The fact that other people like Ismail Haniyeh and others will try to negotiate doesn't have any meaning. Because
The political bureau in Doha.
Right, because actually he is the one who makes the decision. You can't negotiate with Yahya Sinwar, first of all, because he's lying or hiding somewhere in underground tunnels in Gaza, somewhere, and nobody really knows where. Now, the second issue is that Israel doesn't recognize Yahya Sinwar as a partner to negotiate directly with him. So we try to apply pressure on him, coming out from Qatar on one hand, from Egypt on the other hand, but it doesn't help so much for the time being. I don't believe that if we can negotiate directly with him, let's say that the Israeli government decided that it recognized the existence of Yahya Sinwar as a partner to discuss with him and negotiate directly with him.
But hold it for a second. Why recognize? Wasn't one of the special capabilities of your former organization, Mossad, in having contacts even with those enemies who do not recognize Israel and who are not recognized by Israel?
It did, and still is. But the fact is that if you want to negotiate directly with Yahya Sinwar, that means that Israel admits that it negotiates directly with the most threatful and most horrible enemy it faced during the last 20 years. And taking in consideration what happens on October 7, 2023, it lies in the head of each Israeli or Jew all over the world, and of course it's non-negotiable.
So it's politically untenable.
Right. Now, that's about Hamas. And for that, we go by negotiator, by mediators, by the Hamas, by Egyptians, by Qatar, by the Americans. The Americans are trying to apply pressure on Qatar, to apply pressure on the leadership that is laying or deployed in Doha. But it doesn't help so much because Yihis and war is Yihis and war.
So, Eran, it sounds like as if we are trying to brew coffee through two filters. And the result may not be so palatable. Or to use another metaphor, to mix them, this is all lost in translation. Isn't there a better way?
Well, not in this case. And the comparison with the Palestinian situation back in 1980, from 1988 onwards, leading on to the Oslo process and so on, is misleading in the sense that at the time the Palestinians adopted a political position, strategic position. It may have been a false move, it may have been a big lie, but it was endorsed back in November 88, the position of the Palestinian leadership, the PLO leadership, that they are seeking a return to the implementation of a partition, and that therefore they are not taking a stance that implies the elimination, the destruction of Israel. Hamas is in a different category. Hezbollah is in a different category, and so anything that lends legitimacy to their position is not only politically but profoundly ideologically untenable. And by the way, it cuts both ways. Neither are they willing to look at Israel as a legitimate interlocutor at all. As far as they're concerned, Israel does not exist or should not exist as a legitimate entity. So you are at a very different corner. But I would agree that we have a complication here because the interlocutor, I don't think there's a problem of lost in translation. We are not wandering in the streets of Tokyo with no Japanese. We are talking Arabic and English to people who speak fluent Arabic and English. That's not the problem. The problem is that the two interlocutors who did position themselves in this particular case have their own agendas and their own interests. Clearly the Qataris are using this position vis-a-vis Hamas to legitimize their regional role, to legitimize an outsized profile way beyond the actual demographic and geographic importance of Qatar. Of course, they have huge money resources, but this is not about money. This is about Qatar moving into a political space that bridges between Hamas and the West. And on the other hand, the Egyptians, with a very deep hostility towards Hamas, have a vested interest in resolving this because they want the situation in Gaza to be brought under some sort of control. They are also the ones who have the direct channels, I believe, to Sinwar in some technical ways. At the end of the day, even the Egyptians don't entrust this to their diplomats, because if they would be recognizing the legitimacy of Hamas, which they refuse to do. So this is being handled by the Egyptian security services, by the intelligence ministry, by Abbas Kamel and his men. They would never allow an Egyptian diplomat to be in the same room with Hamas, because the moment you do this, you lend a diplomatic legitimacy to an organization.
But hold on, Eran. You say the same room. Amnon, same room, same corridor, same hotel, proximity talks. Who are we trying to deceive here?
It's not the same situation, because when we negotiated the release of Gilad Shalit, and the negotiations were held in the same hotel, at the same corridor, In one room, the Israeli delegation, on the second room is a Hamas delegation, and the Egyptians in between.
And the room service?
Room service, of course. And they, of course, brokered the deal that in the end brought the release of Gilad Shalit. It's only one person. Now, on October 7, everything has been turned upside down. That means you cannot sit in the same room, in the same hotel, in the same corridor with the same delegation of Hamas. And of course, who is this delegation right now? Are you going to speak to Ismail Haniyeh? What kind of effect does he have on Yahya Sinwar? To give him orders to release the prison? No, Yahya Sinwar has his own agenda. He is responsible in his own eyes, of course, of what happens in Gaza. He wants people to get back into the northern part of Gaza. He wants a ceasefire. He wants the Israelis out of Gaza. And these are the terms. And that, of course, cannot match with what Ismail Haniyeh can say. So for the time being, it's not relevant. What used to be cannot be the same after October 7, 2023.
However, Eran mentioned what happened after the Algiers Convention of the PLO, which gave the outgoing Reagan administration and the incoming Bush administration the rationale for holding direct and open talks with the PLO because they changed their covenant and were becoming legitimate. But 15 years earlier, after the terror act in Khartoum, where American diplomats were assassinated by so-called Black September, really Fatah, the CIA, on Nixon's orders, started a dialogue with the PLO, ostensibly only for security reasons, so American diplomats in Beirut would be protected. And that blossomed into a political dialogue.
Right.
Your counterparts from the Central Intelligence Agency...
Enshrined in a novel, Roman Aklef by Ignatius.
Regarding Bob Ames, who did it when former CIA Director Hans was the ambassador in Tehran, and it all happened in the Persian Gulf. Can't you people, I'm talking about you old intelligence hands, find some trick to do it without recognizing the other side?
It's not about recognizing or not. I said that one more time. Things have changed after October 7. You cannot trust this man. You cannot negotiate directly with him. Israel sees him as a main responsible for what happened to us, this massacre of people, this abduction of people into Gaza, 246 people at the beginning, and 134 left. I hope that most of them are alive, but we know that it's not. So you can't negotiate directly with him, even without recognizing his existence, or because he doesn't recognize the existence of Israel, he denies Israel. He made this terrible act against us. Now, you can't hold direct negotiations with him.
What sort of position, how logical is it? It sounds contradictory. You tell Sinwar and the world, first, we want to negotiate with you so that you release all the hostages under certain conditions, which are the gist of the negotiations. And once it's over, we are going to kill you. What sort of an incentive is it to the other party?
He doesn't have any incentive. As long as we are threatening to go into Rafah and to demolish all its capabilities and to rule everything that was related to Hamas in Gaza Strip, he will stick to his position. He has the cards in his hand. He said, are you willing to negotiate with me? Okay. Do you want the release of people? Fine. I have my own terms. Ceasefire, return of people to northern Gaza, get out of Gaza, leave us alone, and Hamas will keep on ruling Gaza Strip for the next coming years.
Cancel all of your achievements over the last 6 months and actually admit defeat.
Right.
The most powerful military in the Middle East would admit defeat at the hands of the so-called resistance movement, and this will be historically an achievement which all the Arabs and Muslims will celebrate for generations.
I think that he made a major step on October 7. He won a huge victory in his own eyes or in the Arab world's eyes. and terror organization that can launch such an attack and cause us so much damage and kill so many people without the IDF interfering and abducting so many people into Gaza. It's a huge victory for him. And now he wants another one. He wants to be Salah ad-Din for these modern times.
Eran, there is this cliche, this hackneyed term, eliminate the middleman. Why do you have through a middleman to go through a middleman when you buy an apartment and pay the agent a commission? If you, the seller and the buyer, can save on both sides. But it seems as if in the Middle East sometimes it pays to have a middleman, especially if the middleman is the US government, which is willing to pay you. Israel and Egypt at Camp David, and there are other cases, or in Oslo. The middleman pays you in order to have a pact which saves the middleman too a lot of trouble. Can that work with organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas?
Well, these are the two very different sets of issues. With Hamas, we are fighting to basically bring this organization to an end. This is more reminiscent of unconditional surrender, basically, in the Nazi era. And by the way, even then, when it came to trying to save lives, the Zionist movement was willing to negotiate with certain Nazis a trucks for lives deal that was derailed by the Allies at the time. So there is a special, let's say, moral department in diplomacy that has to do with saving human lives held at the hands of the enemy. And this is what we are trying to do in the case of Hamas. I would prefer the middleman in this case to be the Egyptians, because at the end of the day, in the game of camps in the Middle East, Egypt is in our camp and Qatar is in another camp. When it comes to the Lebanon situation, the French and the Americans are now trying to basically bring about a solution that would enable Israelis to go back to live in northern Israel and remove Hezbollah from the immediate border in implementation of an already existing UN resolution 1701, which was completely a story of a total failure of implementation so far. And this is because Israel and Lebanon does not intend to obliterate Lebanon. It assumes a future in which Lebanon and Israel would be neighbors, and the question is, and even mutually benefit from resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. But this requires a negotiation, and here again the role of the mediators is significant. And I'm not very optimistic about the chances of success, but it is still an ongoing effort.
Amnon, let's talk for a moment about two other forms of contribution by mediators. One is peacekeeping forces. The original contingent of what was called UNSO, still is, United Nations Truce Supervision observers, only had to observe. And there were mixed armistice commissions, which did not have a lot of success. Of course, this has to do with the makeup of the United Nations, where member states, especially in the Security Council, have more power than the Secretariat or the mechanism itself. However, when the Canadian Foreign Minister Lester Pearson came with the idea of UNEF, the United Nations Emergency Force in the Sinai, it gave the Egyptian ruler Nasser a pretext for his domestic consumption. He told his people that he cannot attack Israel again because he is going to get in trouble with the entire world or the international powers. So this is a sort of a tripwire or a sort of an excuse It's working with the Syrians in Andof. It is not working, as Eran said, with UNIFIL. And of course, the first I in UNIFIL is for interim. This has been an interim force for 46 years now.
Since 1978.
Right. So this is one element. Can that be a sort of contribution in Gaza?
I'm not sure that the peacekeeping force will do the what's necessary to be in Gaza. Gaza should be ruled on two dimensions. The first one is what we call the civilian side, meaning to control healthcare, water sources, electricity, and so on and so on and so on. Peacekeeping force will not do that, will not function in that areas. So you need something else to control the area of Gaza, assuming that Hamas is totally demolished and it can't control Gaza anymore. You need somebody else. Now, the Israeli government says who won't be there. They don't say who may be. That means that they deny the fact that this technocratic government that was established right now by Abu Mazen should be able to control Gaza as well. And as I understand that when the defense minister was just visiting the US, he spoke about a combination of Arab countries or Muslim countries to send troops to control Gaza on some mechanism. I don't see it coming very soon. And that should be one dimension. The second one is what
we do have one precedent, and that is the 1975-76 civil war in Lebanon,
Right.
when the Maronites asked the Syrians, under the guise of an inter-Arab deterrence force, to come in, and thereby the Syrians occupied Lebanon.
And they played right in the hands of President Assad because he wanted to have the great Syria, and he had this opportunity as invited.
This was
Being invited by the
Hafez
Christians.
Assad, the father of the current.
No, I'm speaking about Assad.
Yes, no, just for the sake of our viewers.
Okay.
It's not the same Assad.
No. But the same family name is the same
family.
one. Even though it's not the right name, but that doesn't really matter.
Let me ask Eran regarding the other sort of contribution, and that is money. Everyone likes money, even Israelis. And what happened, for instance, not only at Camp David, which was mentioned, the security assistance which Israel got as a grant, and Egypt on more inferior terms. After Oslo, the Norwegians, and they mediated part of the deal, they contributed quite generously, as did the Japanese or other European countries. Is that a possible contribution?
Gaza would need a massive investment in reconstruction. The war has been very destructive. The manner in which Hamas placed its positions, its men, its launchers, whatever, in civilian areas led to very extensive destruction, dislocation. People will need homes to go back to. There's going to be a huge investment required. And given the intense attention to the misery of the Gazans, which engulfed international opinion, I think governments could probably also find a way to justify to the voting public an investment in this project if, and that's the key, if it leads to a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. And for this, we need the capacity to integrate three elements that need to go together. One is reconstruction. The second is law and order, and of course the extirpation of terrorist capabilities. And the third, security. And the third element is de-radicalization, working to change the mindset, the educational system, the manner in which these issues are discussed in the mosques and in the public squares, the media impact, the symbolism, the idea that the future should be sacrificed for the purpose of destroying Israel, that needs to be essentially uprooted in the same manner in which pernicious ideas were uprooted elsewhere after the military situation proved that they are disastrous. I'm thinking, Germany is just one example. So all three have to go together, and they need a coordinating function. And I ultimately believe that it is not something that Israel can handle on its own. There would need to be a multinational and regional involvement in that. I'm saying multinational, not international, because the United Nations as an institution and its subsidiary organizations did not exactly prove themselves at the test of history. And we mentioned UNIFIL here as one example of what could have been a fine and effective organization, which ended up doing nothing, practically nothing in 18 years.
I take it that the multinational force and observers in the Sinai, which was set up exactly in order not to be subject to the UN Security Council, cannot be now diverted to this task, but because of
Not as such, but the model of control established for the MFO should be a point of departure for a serious discussion on the future of Gaza.
One last question, yes or no, for both of them. If the two leaders, Netanyahu and Sinwar, were in a room, maybe like two scorpions in a bottle, could they have solved the dispute? Amnon.
In my opinion, no.
Eran.
No, not in. We underestimate the commitment of people like Sinwar to our physical destruction.
We are not going to.
What would we settle for? To be half destroyed? I mean, this is essentially an absurdity.
So I think you make a very convincing case, and if that's the case, we are not going to set it up here at the TV7 studio. For the time being, this has been Jerusalem studio from TV7 Israel News, and we will be back with another edition soon. Thank you from Jerusalem.